football, basketball, baseball, and more. Your source for ACC sports is ACC Nation. Available on podcast, streaming radio, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe.
Welcome to ACC Nation. That's Will Ojanen. I'm Jim Quist, and we have a special guest with us from, well, a football team that pulled off something somewhat shy of miraculous in 1970, David Doda. And he has a book that's out, and we're going to be talking about that and taking that journey back in time to kind of look at what was going on in 1970 at Wake Forest and the world. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Hello.
All right, let's.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Our pleasure to have you. Interesting, looking back. There are some memories that I certainly have, and I started out with this. I started looking at the history of 1970 and how turbulent the world was, and then I eased over into your episodes of accounts of what's going on at Wake Forest in football in 1970. And there was this brief moment of sanity and excitement that just sort of allowed everything else to melt away, which I think is just incredibly awesome. And if you would, I know you've got the book there in front of you, if you would hold that up to the camera, because I want people to see this, because when they order it off of Amazon, you're going to be looking for no offense, no defense, no hope. It's a great book. It's got a lot of memories, and David is joining us to talk a little bit about that. So, first of all, let's get into your student, and this is your senior year, 1970, and there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world. Not just in the world, but, the U.S. and everywhere else. And go back memory-wise and talk a little bit about your experiences as a young man and the things you were dealing with, draft and all this other stuff that's there, the insanity of Vietnam and et cetera, and the music and whatever else was going on. Tell us a little bit about those experiences, because that's a great memory.
Yeah, I tried to capture those kinds of experiences in the book to set the tone for the environment that we were in. Okay, I was recruited out of northern Jersey to Wake Forest in 1967. There was 30 of us that were on the freshman team, and this year was the last year that freshmen were not eligible, and so you had a freshman team as opposed to being fodder for the varsity. We were fodder anyway, but we weren't part of the varsity.
Yeah.
And when I got there, the year before, Wake Forest was a Southern Baptist sponsored school, and they just allowed dancing on campus. Okay. When I left after working on my master's 7 years later, there was co-ed dorms. Now, that's the steep curve that went through that environment. It was an amazing time to live. So we got there were 30 of us. 12 of us remained on the championship team. Whether we flunked out or, wasn't worth it or whatever. There were 12 of us. 11 of us were starters. And we had gone through, I don't know if you can say hell or not on the podcast, but hell in a handbasket to come back. So basically, we went through Kent State. We went through, one time I came back, I think as a junior, from being home at Thanksgiving and home to New Jersey, flew into Greensboro, took a cab from Greensboro in. At that time, I-40 went through the middle of Winston-Salem. Wake was on the west side. Greensboro was on the east side. Mm-hmm. There were tanks on every exit and entrance to Winston-Salem because Winston-Salem was burning and they didn't want any outside agitators. Okay? We went through the draft. I sat there. It was after a basketball game. We sat in the car with three other friends, and my number, we missed the first 100. Okay? My number wasn't in the next 100, and then they went and played music. My number wasn't in the next 100, so I'm 300 now, and they went and played music. I lucked out and got 335. My draft got up to 205 that year in Hackensack, New Jersey. That next morning, as if any of you can remember, there were sheets hung out all the dorm windows, number 5, going to Canada. And that didn't correct until years later when, they were given amnesty to come back. It was a very tumultuous time. Racially, it was awful. Okay, now, we didn't have a lot. Wake Forest was an all white, all right school. I mean, it just was at the time. It's much more integrated now, but basically the black players were athletes with a few exceptions. Okay, and I can recall how I was just amazed at what was going on in the world or in the United States in terms of racism. Just absolutely amazed because on the field, there is none. You've got everybody's back. You're a group. And that's the way we played. And that's the only reason that we won. Yeah, there was a lot of other incidents that were going on during that time. Kent State, lots of different things that I brought up in the book. But it was amazing how Cal Stahl was able to make it so hard for us that all we wanted to do was bond together. We didn't care, or we didn't show it, or it didn't affect the outside world. There was 70 something, 76 of us or 73 of us when he took over. And the first season, 30 something, or it's in the book, I forget the number, quit, just walked off. They didn't love it anymore. The most classic was in the middle of spring drills one time, one of our starting defensive linemen just got up, threw his helmet off, said, "Fuck this," and walked off. Okay? So, I mean, it was in a very interesting time from a social perspective, but I even get chills just thinking and talking about what the season meant and what the teammates meant. And I've read the book probably 20 times in proofing it and all that kind of stuff. It still brings me to tears. So I think that we just wanted it. We bonded together and we just wanted it. And that's all I could say,
Yeah.
It was a great ride.
Coach Stahl is, as you indicated, old school, and those old school guys know how to grind you down, and I guess get you focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's football, and it allows you to sort of leave the outside world out there. So, Will,
And
Yeah, good to meet
just let me
you.
add to that.
Yeah.
Let me just add to that for a quick minute. Uh, one of my teammates and classmate, Dick Bazoin, had said that during those really hard drills that we had and how we were getting beat to a pulp, he said he wanted to quit every day, but he wasn't going to let Cal beat him.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's basically the sentiment of the ones that survived. Sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead. No, by all means, you were the guest. You go ahead and talk. But we're on the subject of Coach Stoll. One of my favorite parts of the early part of the book was the first meeting with Coach Stoll, and you learned something called Cal's time. Can you
Yes.
explain that to the people?
Okay, so Cal was hired in the November, December, I think December timeframe before the '69 season. Okay, and he hired his assistant coaches, and they looked at film from the previous year on every returning player and graded them. So then, after they got all through all that, they called the first team meeting. And, a bunch of us were already there, and there was a bunch that were coming in right at the 3 o'clock time in the afternoon that it was. Well, he locked the door at 10 till 2 or 10 till 3. And there were people banging on the outside. And that was Cal's time. You're there early or you don't get in. Now, he did let those people in. And that, if you got to that part of the book or whatever, that meeting basically consisted of introducing the assistant coaches, fine. And then they unveiled a player board where you had positions and people's names, basically where they played, standard. But there was a color next to each one. And so he explained this. And he said that if you gold next to your name, the coaches have evaluated that you're a gold chip person and your skills and stuff are going to contribute to our program. If there's a black line mark next to your name, that means that we think you have the ability, and with proper coaching, you can contribute to the program. And then he paused and he said, if there's a brown next to your name, you know what that means. Okay? Now, over 70% of the people on there had brown next to them. I had brown next to mine.
That was my next question.
Okay? Now, of those people that had brown, probably at least 50% of them quit. Okay? Maybe more. And that was just two things were said. Cal wanted people that had the skills, but also had the desire to win. And he wanted to know that whoever was left wanted it bad enough to win. And that's what he found. Our first game, and it's in there, it's classic Cal. We're playing against NC State. This is his first game as head coach. And this is '69, and we were ranked terrible in '69 also. But we played NC State, and NC State was ranked, I think, in the top 10 in the beginning, going into the year, something like that. And it was at State. And we're in the locker room, pregame speech. He stops, puts out the lights, so it's pitch dark in there, and starts playing Battle Hymn of the Republic. And by the time I'm getting goosebumps right now. By the time it got to Hallelujah, the team is in an uproar and bursts out of the locker room. It was, anytime I tell that story or read it, I get goosebumps. Same thing as everybody does that was there. We went out and won 22-21. I think we were 3-7-1 or 2-8 or something that year. I forget what we were, but we weren't very good. And the next year, we won the championship. But that was the mode, the style of the coach. He wanted winners, and he was going to make winners.
Given what the world was like in 1970, how was Coach Stoll able to just kind of block the distractions for everybody on the team?
He made us too tired to worry about anything else. We were killed. We were literally killed. We had 4-hour. The stuff we did isn't even allowed today. Okay? Bull in the ring. We did that for an hour. If you're familiar with what Bull in the Ring is. We did all kinds of things that just weren't. One time, it's in the book too, but one time, we had it was during spring practice, and we had a Saturday scrimmage normally, okay? And so after the scrimmage, a bunch of us went out and did some relaxing. Well, two friends of mine and I got in our car. We went and got some beer, and independently, we drove to the Thunderbird Drive-In Theater. And lo and behold, in the back row of the theater, all sitting out on there of the drive-in, all sitting on top of the cars, was 3/4 of the team. I didn't know it. We didn't know it, but everybody had gone there. And besides being that, it was one of Russ Mayer's politically incorrect films that was showing. Okay. But regardless of that, so we're all sitting there. We had a nice time. Nobody really got, drunk or anything. We just went home. Well, the theater manager on Sunday morning calls up Cal and says, I just wanted to tell you what a nice group of young men you have on your team. And I wish you the best of luck, because they were out here. They were respectful. They were sitting on their cars, drinking beer, just having a nice time. Okay. Sundays are a practice that's a light practice. You go in sweats and you just do some running to get out kinks and that kind of stuff. We did that. After that practice, he lined us up for 100-yard sprints, which is not uncommon. You do a couple 100-yard sprints and you go in. We must have done 1 million of them. Okay. And he was on the sidelines saying stuff like, how'd that beer taste last night? And called out a name or something like that. And guys were literally pulling off to the side and throwing up. He made his point.
I'd say so. Jim?
Got rid of that beer really quickly.
Yeah.
You were playing tight end, but you didn't start out there. Tell us the progression there.
Oh yeah, that's
what happened.
Okay. In high school, I was ostensibly the largest kid on my team. We were awful in New Jersey. Won 2 or 3 games my senior year. We lost like 74-12 and 40-0 to different people in Bergen County. But anyway, so I was recruited, and the man that recruited me, Baby Feathers, I was an offensive tackle and a defensive end in high school. Okay. He told me, you come to Wake Forest and you'll play tight end. Okay. Now, I like that because I wanted to play tight end, but regardless. So I get down to Wake Forest and I'm a defensive and outside linebacker. Okay. That's where I ended up. And it turns out that the year before the 70 season, in other words, the spring practice before then, okay, the linebacker coach didn't like me. Now, I will show you why he didn't like me.
You still have this.
Because wherever I went, I wore this. Okay, around my jacket, a tie-dyed hippie thing. Okay, and so when spring practice came around, during the first few days, I was the blocking dummy. I was the one that everybody else had to bounce off of, and I was the only returning senior. And so the other guys, sophomores, freshmen that were coming up would come to me and say, Dotes, why aren't you starting? Why aren't you this kind of stuff. Well, after about 3 days of absolutely getting killed, okay, I went in to Cal and said, I'd like to switch to offense. And Cal later had recanted that. He said, David went through the previous stuff. He put in his dues. He was getting a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Physics. I was going to let him play wherever he wanted to because he's not going to contribute anyway. I don't know if he said those last words, but that was the sentiment. Okay. And so I switched over to offense. And as it turned out, we went to a I was second team tight end. And as we turned out, we went to a two tight end offense. And that's when I started for the next 2 years. So it was both serendipitous that coach hated me and, whatever. It was a good move.
Fascinating thing about this story overall is you really emphasize the part of going through the struggle together, the members of this team, the individuals, and how it connected everyone. And there is this sort of indomitable spirit that comes about with being tested, and that often happens in sports. And eventually, this led to a 1970 ACC football championship for Wake Forest. It would be their first since they helped organize and create the ACC in 1953. Who did you play against, and what was that experience like when you finally realized we've won?
Well, okay. First of all, that year we started off against Johnny Rogers and Jerry Taggy, Nebraska, at Nebraska.
Ouch.
A sea of red. Okay. And we were 0-3 to start the season. We shouldn't have lost the third game to Florida State, but we did. We fumbled it away. But anyway, so we had a championship game against our arch rival, North Carolina, towards the second half of the season. And we won that 14-13 on a 90-plus yard drive at the end of the game. That about 5 or 6 years ago, Wake Forest Sports asked the alumni, what is the most memorable sports incident? And not unanimously, but by a long shot, the drive was the number one choice 55 years ago or 50 years ago. So anyway, we did that. We beat Duke. We beat NC State, and we were down in Houston. And Houston was ranked, I don't know, in the top 20 at the time. And we found out before the Houston game that Carolina had beaten Duke. So Duke was 5-2, but we were 5-1. So that's why we won. I think that's correct.
That is.
And so we won the ACC before the Houston game, and the Houston game was somewhat anticlimactic. But coming back, we got back from Houston at like 3, 4 in the morning, and the place was packed with fans just going nuts. It was a special time.
Well,
yeah. So I wanted to ask you about a couple other players that were on that team. First off, quarterback Larry Russell looked like he was a very big part of that offense. What do you remember about him?
Okay, well, all right. First of all, Larry lives up in Massachusetts, and I've seen him several times at functions and stuff like that. And as you might expect, we're all pretty good friends. But Larry was quoted by other coaches and sports writers as probably the best option quarterback in the country in 1970. He was an amazing performer because he was almost like a Houdini with the ball, with pitching the ball or keeping it or deciding when to keep or when to pitch. Now, he had the surroundings around with Larry Hopkins and Gary Johnson to do the rushing. We were not a passing team. We were a running team. But he was a magician. He just was.
Who were some of the other running backs on that team that carried the load with them?
Okay, Larry Hopkins was the primary. Larry Hopkins was a junior college transfer from Lees-McRae, and his first year was our 70 season. Okay, Cal recruited him, and he came in, and there's stuff about him in the book that talks about some of the hardships he had to deal with, but he was a tremendous person, and he rushed for 1,000 yards our championship year, and he married a Wake Forest graduate, Beth Norbury, and both of them were good friends. Larry passed away a few years ago, but he had an outstanding athletic career. Then he went on to do even greater things as a obstetrician. He founded a women's clinic in Winston-Salem for the underprivileged women. He was on the board of directors of Wake Forest. He was just, and they just recently dedicated a dorm to him and his wife. He's an awesome ball player. And if I could share one story that's really good. Okay, so I forget who we were playing, but as tight end, if on the option play, one of the options was Larry would kind of dive straight in off guard or off tackle, and if the defense did the right thing, he would get the handoff. Okay, if they didn't, Larry would pull it out and go down the line for the next option. Okay, so on this play, he got the handoff. Now my job as the opposite tight end was to bump the linebacker so he wouldn't come rushing in, and go and get a safety that might be coming up to make the tackle. Okay, fine. Larry breaks through the line, breaks through the linebackers. He's running free, maybe 5-10 yards from the line, and he's telling himself, "Where's Dodes? Where's Dodes?" Because I'm supposed to take care of this safety that's coming up to make the hit. At the last minute, I dive in front of him, get my head and helmet on him. Larry jumps over my legs and scampers down 90 yards or 60 yards or whatever it was. Okay? Now that's a nice story, okay? And I remembered that, and I've told it a few times. After Larry passed away, Wake had a memorial service for Larry, okay, at Wake where, we honored him. And after his children spoke and all this kind of stuff, after the memorial service and while the crowd was mingling around, I went up to Beth, who I knew well, and I said, "Beth, I want to tell you a story about Larry." So I told her that story, and she put her hand on my arm, tears in her eyes, and said, "David, I have heard that story 100 times. Larry told that same story over and over again to anybody that would listen. And that just made it all worthwhile. It just did. He was a tremendous athlete and an even more tremendous person."
Jim?
The other people that really did contribute, and I can't name them all, but my freshman roommate, Terry Karchik, was a 2-year All-ACC safety. He just recently passed away. We called him Bones because he was a bag of bones, but he knew how to play and he knew how to hit. Win Headley was an All-American defensive tackle, and he was a leader and a great guy. Dick Chilada. Gary Johnson was a running back that picked up the slack. He got hurt, and then Kenny Garrett picked up the slack for him. Very fleet back, and they were good. Steve Bowden, as a wide receiver, was a tremendous asset, and he made some fantastic catches in that drive just to keep it going. I can go on and on about the different people. We had some underclassmen linebackers, Ed Bradley and Eddie Stetz. Eddie Stetz won a few National Year Linebacker of the Year, or Defensive Man of the Year award, for that month or for that week or whatever. I think Larry and Eddie Stetz were both honored in several different weeks as the ACC Players of the Year. And one time, I think Eddie got National Defensive Player of the Year. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's right. But Ed Bradley has 3 Super Bowl rings playing with the Steelers. You know, so we had guys that really were very, very important to the team, played very well. One of the stories that's in the book too that you talked about camaraderie and it's overused, but band of brothers and this kind of stuff. When we were sophomores, no, we were freshmen. We finished practice, and it was somewhere in late August before season started. Okay, and my roommate Terry Kaharchik and myself were up in our room, except that Terry had already been to the Tavern on the Green to maybe get a little more liquid in his system. And the Kappa Alpha fraternity was right under our house, right under our dorm, because the fraternities were in the dorms, but they were just segmented in the corners of the dorms. And this was the hello or weekend where they would invite local young ladies to the fraternity, girlfriends, whatever, to the fraternity for a party. Nothing outlandish. Remember, we just passed dancing on campus, and there was no drinking technically on campus. So they blast, I mean, like a gazillion megawatts of Dixie continuously. Okay? My roommate, being from Tyre Hill, Pennsylvania, didn't really appreciate that, and he was in no shape to appreciate anything. So he starts yelling out of our window certain things towards the Kappa Alphas that may not have been appreciated. And as these young ladies all dressed out in their, Gone with the Wind regalia, I mean, they're in party dresses with gloves and everything else. So it's not real difficult to know where you're yelling from, because all you do is got to count up the windows and count over the windows, and that's the suite they're doing it from. So 3 fraternity members decide that they were going to come up to our suite and pound the living out of us. Okay, and that's what they started. They did. They ran up the stairs. They came in. I locked the door of our room. It was a suite of 4 bedrooms, but I locked the door to our bedroom. What does my bag of bones roommate do? He goes, unlocks the door, and says, "Let me at him." Okay? So they come bursting into our room, just ready to pound us. And the 4th person coming in was also a fraternity brother, and his name was Jimmy Clack. And Jimmy Clack played offensive tackle, and he also went on to play with the Steelers and the Giants, and I think he even has a Super Bowl ring before he passed away of other issues. Jimmy comes in, looks at us, and as one of the initiation rites to be a freshman football player, you had to have your head shaved. Okay? He saw us, didn't know us from Adam, but saw our heads, and he said, "You guys are football players, aren't you?" And we said, "Yeah." And he pulled the other guys off of us. And he just said, "Don't do it again," and left. That's brotherhood. And he didn't know us from Adam. He just knew we were on the team. And that wasn't due to Cal. That was just due to teammates. And Cal just reinforced that brotherhood.
Lots of fun stories like that. a lot of interesting stories. There is one story that stood out to me that absolutely shot daggers through my heart, because and that was coming back from the Virginia win. And that's a tough experience. And tell us about what happened and how that affected all of you.
Okay. So we went up to Virginia, and Virginia was a big win for us. Okay. And it was an ACC win, and it was a big win. We played well. It was their homecoming. It was a big win. We get on the bus, and it starts to drizzle rain. So now we're coming down State Road 29, Charlottesville, back down to Winston-Salem. Okay. And this is at the time, I believe it was one lane each way. It may have been two lanes each way, but there was no divider. Okay. It was just okay. And so it was raining and we stopped. Traffic. Okay. Probably an accident up there in the rain. Turns out that Larry's girlfriend, or Larry Russell, her girlfriend, she was in a car with her cousin that came to the game from Massachusetts, and then they were driving back to Winston-Salem. They flipped, and she was killed. He wasn't, but she was killed. And it turned out that Larry was sitting in the front seat of the bus. You know, the one that, as you walk on a bus, there's one right to the left that kind of overlooks the stairs going down. Mm-hmm. That's where he and another good friend of mine, Mickey Neer, were sitting. And he knew immediately that it was his girlfriend's cousin's car. And he just started screaming and berserk, and people were trying to hold him back in. And it was just heart-wrenching. There's nothing to describe the feeling. I mean, I can remember sitting, three-quarters of the way back in the bus with some of the other teammates and just not knowing what to do. And Larry, he went back to Massachusetts for the funeral and the memorial service. He came back the next Thursday, I think it was, and we had a memorial service at Wake Chapel, which is the chapel at Wake Forest. And he told everybody in a team meeting that he was going to play. And it was probably really good therapy for him. And it shows of his commitment and winning desire, but it was tough. It was really tough. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. I mean, we're 19, 20-year-old kids, and that's not an excuse, but you don't deal with death that often, that young, unless your grandparents or something have passed away normally. Now in Vietnam, we did deal with friends going over and not coming back, but it was removed. This was right up close and personal. It was difficult. And hats off to Larry and his family and my teammates, because I think it even bonded us together even more. Can't say that for sure, but it seemed to be. I mean, we wanted to win anyway, but there was probably a little extra oomph for Larry.
I was going to say that this is just another example of how everyone came together, and you've talked throughout this interview about how everybody is still connected after all these years, and that commonality is admirable, to say the least. It's also something that those years of fighting through things and experiencing the things you just explained there, they do bring people close together. They are lasting ties, and that's pretty obvious with what you've written in the book and how you explain the relationship with some of the people who have been on the team, and it just continues to last throughout life.
It's like we were never apart when we get together now.
Yeah.
It's just, Am Dodds and Dick Bazoin is Dickie and Larry Russell is Russ, and and we make fun of each other, and we just laugh and reminisce, and it's just it's just a wonderful experience.
Cannot beat that.
You have that with good friends too, but you have some high school friends that you can get back together with, and it's like you were never apart. But with this group of guys, it's just that way.
Fascinating. There is so much more to talk about here, and we don't have the time to do it. But here's what I'm going to recommend: that if you find parts of the story or all of the story fascinating, you should be going to Amazon and picking up No Offense, No Defense, No Hope. It's the story about the 1970 Wake Forest football team, the guys, their experiences, their struggles, things that they've overcome, and the joy of winning their first ACC championship at Wake Forest. It's absolutely phenomenal read. Again, go to Amazon. No Offense, No Defense, No Hope. Excellent write-up, David. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with Will and myself about all of these experiences. It almost feels to me as if I'm there when you're explaining it. It's what a great memory. What a great memory.
Yeah. I've had very positive feedback from anybody that's read the book, and not only from the football story, but from the things that people remembered and were brought up. Oh, I forgot about that. And the things I brought up about this sign of the times. So it was a wonderful experience, and I thank you for your kind words, and I've enjoyed talking with you.
Certainly, David. And as the Beatles who said goodbye to the world in 1970, as they went out with Let It Be. So thank you, sir. We appreciate David Doda joining us and talking about his book. It's available on Amazon. Make sure that you get it now.
Your source for ACC sports is accnation.net. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, and Blue Sky. For more content, be sure to subscribe.